Hey everyone! If you've got a cat, you already know they have their own way of doing things, right? They kind of run the house on their own terms. But have you ever stopped to think about how these incredibly independent creatures ended up on our couches? The story we all know is that we tamed them. But, the truth is way, way cooler, because it turns out we barely had anything to do with it.
So, this is the question we all start with. I mean, it just makes sense. We domesticated dogs to be our hunting partners, we domesticated horses to get around, so naturally we must have tamed cats, right? We saw these wild animals and decided to bring them into our homes.
Well, here's the twist that flips the whole story on its head. The evidence is pretty clear. We didn't tame them. In a way, they chose to move in with us. It was a story of mutual convenience where cats kind of domesticated themselves.
Okay, so let's get into it. Part 1. An accidental partnership. So how does a simple pest problem lead to this brand new relationship? Well, it all goes back to the very beginning of human civilization.
Let's rewind the clock about 10,000 years. This is a huge moment for humanity. We're giving up the whole wandering hunter-gatherer thing, and we're starting to farm. We're building villages, and most importantly, we're storing extra grain. This creates a whole new environment, and it was basically a giant flashing vacancy sign for some furry, uninvited guests.
And here's the chain reaction. It's so simple. Step 1. We store grain. Step 2. Tons of mice and rats show up for an easy meal. Step 3. Local wildcats realize there's an all-you-can-eat rodent buffet happening, and they move in. And step 4. We got free pest control, and the cats got a never-ending food supply. It was the perfect deal. A total win-win.
Now, we're not just talking about any cat. This is the one, the ancestor of every single house cat purring on a lap today, the Near Eastern wildcat. These guys were lone hunters, super efficient, and perfectly suited for the job. They weren't looking for a cuddle, they were looking for a meal.
So, and this is the most important part, this wasn't some grand plan we cooked up. It was just natural selection doing its thing. Which wildcats got the most food? Well, the ones that were a little less skittish, a little more tolerant of all these weird humans walking around. So they thrived, had more kittens, and passed on those slightly friendlier genes.
And this is where you can really see the difference between cats and dogs. With dogs, it was a team effort. We actively picked them and bred them for specific jobs, right? A real partnership. But with cats, they were on their own path, they adapted to live alongside us, but not necessarily for us.
Okay, part 2. So at what point does this practical arrangement, pest control for room and board, turn into something more? This is where we start to see the first real signs of a true bond.
This timeline really puts it into perspective. So the first meeting is around 10,000 years ago. But check this out. Just 500 years later, which is nothing in evolutionary terms, we find something incredible happening in Cyprus. And that totally sets the stage for what happens thousands of years later in Egypt, where cats basically become gods.
And this is the smoking gun. On the island of Cyprus, archaeologists found a human grave, and right there with them was the skeleton of a cat. Now here's the kicker. Cats aren't native to Cyprus. The only way one got there is if a person put it on a boat. And to then be intentionally buried with it, come on, that's not pest control anymore. That is a beloved companion.
Which brings us to part 3, the sacred Egyptian cat. Because this is where the relationship hits its absolute peak. This is when cats went from being friends to being seen as actual divine beings.
I mean, their status just completely skyrocketed. They were symbols of grace, sure, but also these powerful, sacred protectors of the home. Families loved them so much that they would mummify their pet cats and bury them with honors. And you see them all over Egyptian art, just lounging under chairs. Sound familiar?
And just to give you an idea of how seriously they took this, their sacred status was protected by law. Harming a cat, even on accident, could be a capital crime. That's a level of devotion you just don't see anywhere else in history. It's incredible.
So this reverence, plus their amazing rodent-checking skills, was basically the cat's passport to the rest of the world. Egyptian ships and sailors would not leave port without them, and from there, they spread all over the Mediterranean, then Europe, then Asia, becoming the little global citizens we know today.
Okay, part 4, Wild at Heart. So let's bring all this amazing history right into the present day, because it perfectly explains why your sweet, fluffy cat is still, deep down, a little wild thing. Their origin story is the absolute key to their personality.
And this is really the main takeaway.
Because they basically domesticated themselves, they never evolved that deep-rooted need to please us like dogs did. Their whole journey was about figuring out how to successfully live with us, not work for us.
And that is why all of this feels so familiar. That little gift they bring you from outside, that's the solitary hunter. The way they patrol the house like they own the place, that's their territorial instinct. And that choosiness about when and how they want affection, that's not them being aloof, that's them being a cat, a direct descendant of a wild animal.
And think about this. For about 95% of our shared history, cats were just cats. We only started intentionally breeding them for certain looks or personalities, like Siamese or Persians, in just the last couple hundred years. Genetically, your house cat is still incredibly close to that wild cat that first wandered into a village 10,000 years ago.
And I think this quote just sums it all up perfectly. That famous feline independence, that attitude of doing things on their own terms, it isn't a bug. It's a feature. It is the defining characteristic of their species, one that was earned over a 10,000-year history of being our partners, not our property.
It really leaves you with something to think about, right? The next time your cat is demanding dinner or is completely taken over your favorite chair, just remember, they chose to be here. They set the terms of the agreement a long, long time ago, and they've been managing us pretty well ever since. It makes you wonder, who really domesticated who here?